Let's go. Yeah, so we are here with my good friend John Rivera Pico. He's a composer, he's a guitar player, he's from Puerto Rico, and he's gonna talk about his music, and we're gonna be talking about we'll be having a conversation about contemporary music and aesthetics and stuff like that. So, Young, would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, thank you, Juan and Megan, for having me here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a composer. I'm a guitarist. I've been working with uh, various disciplines throughout my life: composition, guitar, early music, and recently I lived for many years in Europe, and then recently came back to Puerto Rico. And here I am, still making music, still playing guitar, still having fun, collaborating with great composers such as yourselves. So, thank you for having me.
You began from a very early age, right? Like formal
Yeah,
training.
yeah, formal training, yes. I think that in a way, in Puerto Rico, when you kind of either do sports or something artistic after school, and I was never very good at sports. I think I only played chess, and then so my parents from a very early age took me to music lessons. So from maybe 10 years old, I was already in the at the conservatoire taking lessons all the way until I did my undergraduate degree at the Puerto Rico Conservatoire.
With what did you begin with? With what instrument?
I always classical guitar. I never
Oh,
played any other instrument. Yeah.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Hmm.
that's pretty cool. So it's interesting because you've always had. I wouldn't say that you have a love hate relationship with it, with the guitar,
Hmm.
but it's kind of like it's part of you, or it's kind of part of you in a way, right? But you kind of don't like playing your own music. You've told me before, right?
Yeah, I
So
think it's I think it's rare the times that I've played my own music. I think you were at a concert once where I did play my own guitar pieces. Um,
yes,
but I kind of like changing hats. I don't know if it's a way to say it. When I am
Hmm.
yeah,
composing, I really enjoy listening to what I'm doing, and then what I am performing, I like to focus on the performance aspect of it. And also,
Yeah.
I think um, my love hate relationship with the guitar, as you say or as you call it, um, I obviously first started playing guitar and then got into composition later while I was doing my undergraduate degree. And in a way, I think that the love hate relationships come from the fact that in the Caribbean we have a very big tradition of the guitarist composer. You
yes.
know, Leo Brower, Ernesto Cordero, all these figures who are very good guitarists, very good composers, and they kind of defined a very characteristic sound of how the guitar works, and they even invented a language that is, I would say, imitated by most of us when we want to quote unquote write in a idiomatic style for the instrument. And so I think from the very beginning, the biggest conflict I had, or the biggest um the biggest, I don't know, yeah, conflict I had was, how did I not sound like them? How could I step away from that and not just be another one of those guitar composers in that tradition? Which there's nothing wrong with it, but that was my mindset back then when I was starting out. So I kind of from very early on said, no, I'm not going to write that much for the guitar. I'm going to try to write for other instruments, try to show that I can do other things. And then now, many years later, I find myself here now, well, writing for guitar a lot. So it all comes back for full circle.
I think that it's kind of similar. I think that Megan, you kind of have mentioned this before with like your relationship
Hmm.
with the piano, right? Like
Hmm.
piano
I think my
lessons.
relationship, yeah, piano lessons. I think my relationship with horn too is very similar. French horn's my main instrument, and studied it very, very seriously as a kid growing up until I like in college. I decided to focus more on composition, but I definitely had a hard time. There was a few times where I wrote for myself, and I had a hard time wearing both hats at once. I got very stressed and overwhelmed because it was like it's a different type of experience performing a piece and being a performer than being a composer, and like doing those together felt like a lot. So I kind of really stepped away from it. And I think part of the reason I chose composition as a path was my frustrations with the instrument. Is that I think it's just hard. It's just hard to be a performer of an instrument with not a lot of good repertoire. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think so too, because you kind of are the thing with composition, I will say, is that if you rely too much on an instrument, especially the piano, I mentioned the piano because all composers, we have to study the piano to some degree and use
Uh-huh.
it for reference and the register and all of that. But now
Oh, yeah.
it's turning to something like more problematic with this notation software stuff, because
Oh yeah. I
before,
think they're not using the piano anymore. I think they're using MIDI.
you had to kind of like you were you were confined to an instrument, so you had to get away from the instrument and start using more of your mind, right?
Mhm.
With the
Mhm.
keyboard, with the guitar. But now it's like with these MIDI programs, like Finale, it's like the composers seem to be relying more and more on them, which I've
Mm,
seen your handwriting, and both of you actually do a lot of handwriting and
Mhm.
do not go
yeah.
directly to the program. And I think that that's
I
kind of liberating in many ways.
I agree. I think it's very hard. Like I teach a lot of like high school age composers, and I will say, not almost all of them rely heavily on MIDI at beginning levels, but some of them are at pretty advanced levels, still relying on MIDI, and the MIDI is like holding them back. Like they can't because that's what they think everything sounds like, and um, and I try to say like, oh well, your the voice leading is all wacky. It doesn't sound very strong, and they're like, well, no, it sounds great when I play it back on my MIDI. I'm like, well, it might because all these parts are coming together and going into like your earbuds at the same time. You don't really get the sense of different lines in different spaces, and then a lot of times they go into a performance setting and are very disappointed. Some of them even like will blame the performers rather than themselves. A
Yeah.
lot of them will be, yeah, um, which I don't know. I definitely was not like that as a young composer. I don't remember anyone who grew up in like my generation of composers ever being like that. I mean, I guess there was MIDI when I was young, but it really sucked. So like
Yeah.
no one wanted to listen to it.
Mhm.
But I was told from a young age like don't turn the MIDI on.
Mhm.
And I just got used to developing my ear. I would play things on the piano. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I like I studied with John, and I met through like my first composition teacher, Carlos Cabrera, and he wasn't really he was more of a he wrote with his mind, and I kind of inherited that in a way. And he
Yeah.
always told us like, get away from the piano, don't try and copy what you
Mm-hmm.
are doing, like or what you are studying, like and stuff like that. So that was
Well,
really
I
cool.
agree. My teacher was like that too, but now I feel like the piano was like our crutch, and I feel like it's been replaced by MIDI as being the crutch. And I prefer my students playing on the piano over MIDI. But certainly, I think developing the ears is the way to go.
So
Yeah.
how oh, you were gonna say something,
No,
John?
no, no. I completely agree with both of you. I think that before I studied with Carlos Cabrera, whom I studied with privately, because Juan studied at the university in Puerto Rico. I studied at the conservatoire, and Carlos did not teach at the conservatoire. He taught at the, well, teaches still at the university. And when before Carlos, my first composition teacher was this composer who still teaches at the conservatoire called Manuel Seide, who was the conductor of the contemporary music ensemble of the conservatoire. And well, I got into composition because of this ensemble, and because they in Puerto Rico they did the premiere in, I think it was 2012 or 13, of Hans Werner Henze's El Cimarrón, and that for me was absolutely mind blowing. I had never seen the guitar played in that way. I had never thought of opera in that way. I had never seen three brothers running around playing all these percussion instruments. Never even heard of based on the
Seems like you're
uh,
breaking up a bit.
now is it
Yeah,
okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
that was
Yeah,
better.
I had never even heard of these composers, like of these librettos based on this book by this Cuban author Miguel Barnett. There were so many things that were new to me, and well, El Cimarron was really a way of starting this out. And I think when I started studying with him, strict on that fact of writing, uh, really doing what he called table work, sitting down at your desk, desk work, sitting down at your desk, thinking about what you want. And he had a exercises for us in transcription, trying to find out different ways that we could figure out how to replicate sounds that we could transcribe and into different instrumental categories. So, for example, at times he exercises of things that were not even notated, like Stockhausen and pieces, which obviously don't are not notated in traditional form. He would play us the recordings of these pieces and then ask us and tell us, how would you write that, or how would you find a way of writing that? And I think that starts training your inner ear, and starts helping you develop how you want things to sound. It's a process. It's a very slow process, but it really helps you, and it gives you the tools you need to figure out how to work out problems without relying on these softwares. Which the problem with MIDI,
Hmm.
which as Megan, a lot of students are unfortunately relying on it, is that it's all very balanced and all very equally sounding in terms of.
Hmm.
So that's what a lot of the one of the biggest problems in the when students start writing directly on these softwares is you don't see a lot of, because everything sounds the same to them. Everything has the same value. Everything has the same um, kind of texture, and instruments really work. There's all of these other qualities in the instruments that you really need to study and figure out yourself, and that comes only out of training and listening and practice.
Hmm.
So that was your kind of realization moment that you wanted to get more into contemporary music, because I don't know, how would you describe growing up in the conservatoire, and like how did new music moved over there? I didn't
Well,
I didn't have that
like it,
experience really.
I think like many places in Puerto Rico, it's a very small sector of composers and performers in 20th and 21st century music. Um, and well, this ensemble provided a space for us composers and performers that wanted to do something different. And to this day, 15 years or more after I joined the ensemble,
You're
um,
speaking about Aldea 21, right?
at 21, yeah. And I think that one of the great experiences with this group was the fact that the conductor was really open to just playing our pieces and having us listen, not only as an act of premiering them and having them program in a concert, but us learning, from the rehearsals, from the concert, and working with both instrumentalists and conductors, letting us know this worked out, this didn't work out, what would you differently, which is, the greatest workshop ever. That's what you want.
Oh
That's what you
yeah.
need when you're starting out young. And
Yeah.
and a lot of my initial pieces of this exploration with this composer, conductor, and this ensemble. And I sent one of the pieces that I wrote for ensemble. One of the initial pieces I wrote that was premiered around 2015 called Amores, and that piece, written completely by hand, curiously enough, is uh, one of the initial experiments I was doing out of imitation. One of the first pieces that we studied with composer Manuel Seide was Circles by Berio, one of the first pieces he showed us. And that piece, had a
Please,
lot
sir.
of things. Circles by Berio.
Sorry, is that you're
Circles.
breaking up? Circles.
I,
Okay.
yeah, Circles by Berio.
Yeah.
And that opened up a world for you, you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was amazing. Not only because of the music itself, but the notation that it had with all these improvisation um, sections. It was really breathtaking. Still is. I absolutely love that piece. And so my way of working with this group, which specializes in improvisation and these kinds of pieces, well, the result was this piece. Still to this day, there's a lot of things I find in that I enjoy a lot, even though I wrote it 10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so we're back. A bit of technical problems, but yeah, we were talking about
Yeah.
various pieces, how it influenced you, and how you wrote Amores.
Yeah,
It translates
and
as loves.
yeah, loves. I think that the word loves, it comes from a series of poems by E. Cummings, which is the poet burial used in circles.
Uh huh.
And then, well, it really was a way of me imitating, but also finding a way of employing these improvisation devices and this way of working with the performers also becoming a part of the piece. And it was a very early piece, but I really enjoyed the process. And it was also one of my initial um, experiments with voice, which then I've gone on to write more pieces for voice. But it was one of the first pieces that I wrote for voice. A
Oh
big part of it.
yeah, we've talked about this before. Like we have pieces that we all start imitating, right?
Mhm.
We have to start away, but then when we kind of see that we're looking backwards, when we see that we are kind of beginning to find our voice, our musical voice, like we call that our opus one. Like for example, uh, we can. When would you say that that kicked in for you? When would you say that
Um,
your opus one?
well, there's not a specific date, but I would say it would start with that piece with Amores. I would say that's when I
Yeah.
kind of started
Okay.
taking certain decisions that were very much my own. Still
Okay. Okay.
trying to emulate uh, not a style but a form of writing, but it a whole process in terms of exploring colors and textures and text.
Okay. Cool. So should we listen to a bit of it?
Yeah, we can listen to a
Yeah.
bit of it.
Okay. Cool. Give me a second here. Share screen. gonna fast forward a bit. It's 17 minutes long. So let's be, yeah, to be more practical. I wanted to listen to the voice, how you treat the voice.
Yeah, no, I mean, most of my pieces are a bit long. Yeah,
Let's see. Sounds fresh, Time.
yeah. Some spoken text as well.
More towards the end. Here. I think it's
Yeah,
very
and
daunting. I think that you have a very good sense of timbre, and
Yeah.
like it's kind of like from for a first piece, I think that it's kind of like pretty successful, honestly
no,
Hmm.
speaking.
I do this exercise of listening to older pieces quite
Mm-hmm.
often, in the sense that I I think that, whether we think each piece is more or less successful, I mean, that's fine. But I think that in every piece we find that we write, we find something. There's always a particular element that sticks out, and
Mm-hmm.
we that's what we should always be striving for, to reach that again. Like that recommendation was given to me by a dear friend, composer Juan Trigos, and he told me, listen to all your pieces again. Go to your studio, go to your house, sit down, relax, um, and then listen to the piece with the score, and just circle down every moment that you think, wow, this is good, I love this, and then create another piece using just that, and you will always have a piece that you started once that you already really like and really enjoy. And I think it's a very very valuable um, recommendation that we sometimes don't think about a lot. Starting out from points that we really enjoy in past pieces.
And what did you learn with this piece, like about yourself, about your musical self, aesthetically speaking?
I think that I first of all, I think that I learned that I really like percussion, that I really liked percussion instruments, and also that I was really naturally inclined towards writing lines, very linear things, and then my that the counterpoints that were coming out of the ideas that I had were coming out of this development of lines, and a lot of my composition really comes out of composing linear sequences that then I develop and transform gradually. And still to this day, I work
Yeah.
a lot with pitches and work a lot with sequences, and but it all really starts out from lines, from musical lines and melodies and motifs that I construct, and
Hmm.
then everything else just comes afterwards. So I really discovered that my natural format is really linear.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that will. You say that you've told me that during your PhD, there was a period of obsession with Tonatoni. Would you say that that will come
Yeah.
from contrapuntal thinking?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the my obsession with Donatoni started out when, after I finished in the conservatory in Puerto Rico, I went to study in Italy privately, both guitar, early music, and then I studied composition afterwards. And I studied with this composer called Luca Cori, who I still stay in touch with to this day. Really, really amazing composer, who had been brought through this Donatonian school of composition, and he is an amazing teacher. And the way he taught was always listening to what you had and the way you composed. And when he listened to what I did, he told you, I think that the way Donatoni thinks and looks at music through channels, through the transformation of motifs, through this angular style of variation, develop other ideas in your music. And well, this figure of Donatoni became an obsession still to this day. And my graduate and postgraduate degrees, my master's and my PhD, kind of became this search for composers that were colleagues of Luca Cori during his days studying with Donatoni, and I went down searching for them. I studied first in my undergrad degree. I went to do my master's at King's College. There I studied with Sylvia Stein, but I then went on to study at University of Birmingham with Michael Zev Gordon, who also studied with Donatoni. And then in the next month, I went to study with another composer called Beatriz van Rossum, who also was one of the integral composers in Donatoni's years at the Accademia Tigiana in Italy. So my entire graduate studies became this sort of journey towards looking at all these other figures that I've studied with the same guy, but all came out so differently and did their own thing with everything that he taught them. So without a doubt, Donatoni is a big influence on me, still is, and
Yeah.
his method of composing, which is I love it because it's kind of like solving puzzles. So you're always working on ways in which the puzzle can be solved, and it became a really, really, really important part of how I do things.
It's curious
Yeah, I
that
mean, I think that's a mark of like a good teacher that he obviously was, because we had talked about it when we had talked with David Felder on the podcast, and how certain teachers like Morton Feldman supposedly only taught his own craft, and as of such there aren't really any well-known Morton Feldman students. Where
Mhm.
other teachers like our teacher David Felder, he tried to teach people to find their own like unique voice and expression, and then you get this wide variety of students. It's more interesting, I think.
Yeah, I think the approach was never to imitate, even though I did that also. I heavily imitated it because it was a way of starting out. But
Uh-huh.
the goal was always to look at how he does things. It's very clear. It's very um, the procedure of how he thinks about music is very clear. Look at what you can do with that in your own ways, and that was the result of other pieces as well.
Yeah.
can you speak more about your experience? You spoken about a bit about studying in Italy, but can you speak about your experience in the UK at King's College at the University of Birmingham? How's the scene there? The new music scene there? What did you
Well,
learn? How, like,
it's
yeah.
pretty huge. It's pretty huge. It's really big. It's really interesting to see that coming from Puerto Rico, where the contemporary music scene was very small, and then in Italy, there's a bit more. But then in the UK, there were so many opportunities for composers and performers. Um, Not only calls for scores, but also programs for UK based composers, even if they were not UK nationals. And I participated in many, many of them, and was very fortunate to get my pieces played by people like Britain Sinfonia, Birmingham Contemporary Music Group, um, Lontano Ensemble. and it was a really a learning space, and there was also so much activity constantly because we had at King's College we had composers like George Benjamin, who when I studied there was doing his operas and working on his operas constantly, and so we got to see the process of a lot of these operas coming to life, and then at and then also one of the former teachers at King's College was Harrison Birtwistle. So even though he wasn't around anymore because he was a bit older, but still he's had a really big presence at the university. So all of his premieres, we all went to the premieres of, or the performances of his operas and his works, and and then when I went to the UK, I really wanted to study with Oliver Nussin, but he passed
Mhm.
away before I got, or
Oh, okay.
just
Good.
getting there. And but his presence and that of his students, and the influence of his students, all
For
the students
sure.
he had, was really big. I mean, he's
Yeah.
a really, really big figure.
Yeah. He's a great guy. I gotta work with him quite a few times at Northwestern because they have a lifetime achievement award called the Nemers Prize that's like in conjunction with I think the Chicago Symphony, but they do a lot of teaching as part of that prize over the course of 2 years. And 2 of the years that I was a student, he was the winner. Yeah, very articulate teacher, very nice guy, very beautiful music, really unique orchestration sense.
Yeah, he really changed the way I orchestrated and the way I worked with timbre and with instrumental colors because I remember hearing one of his pieces called Coursing, and
Mhm.
then I was absolutely blown away by what he could do with unison. And it became, and it has become, since after all these years, still from a composer whose way of thought is very line based, it was absolutely a revelation to me of how to orchestrate everything
Yeah.
with unison and how to make everything reverberate out of unison, and it really changed the way I started composing.
Hmm. It seems like, yeah, I was into nothing while I was a PhD student. I remember, especially his
Yeah, his
orchestra
music
pieces.
is
His
it's very,
orchestra,
very colorful and unique. His orchestration, it's yeah, difficult to play because it's kind of like it just constantly everything's constantly spinning with new colors, and there are lines, but they're not in one voice. They're like spinning across the orchestra. It's a very cool effect that
No, it's
he
absolutely
gets.
beautiful, and
Yeah.
it's really difficult. I mean, when they perform coursing, you can see, the work that goes into the rehearsals,
Yeah.
and
And
but
ensembly, it's difficult. Not just like the individual parts. It's difficult to put together as an ensemble.
very difficult, and it really takes a lot of concentration, a lot of skill, and also really wanting the effect to come out of this gigantic linear composition, which in the end the result is absolutely beautiful. Um, and I think that that really was for me a very influential composer. Even though I never met him, never studied with him, but having so many people around me that did, it became part of how I saw at least orchestration very clearly.
yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
think when
Yeah.
I heard about his passing away, I think he went away a bit too soon. Honestly
Hmm.
speaking, I
Yeah,
think that
I don't. He was larger than life in every way, like his personality, but also his size. I don't think he led the most healthy lifestyle. Um, yeah, but
yeah,
he was a great guy. Really,
but
really nice, really dynamic, really willing to help people. My first 2 years, Oliver Nussin was the Numbers Prize, and my second 2 years, it was Siriaco, who
oh,
was the opposite. I mean, she just had nothing. And I do like some of Siriaho's, especially some of her early music, but she had nothing to like. She was just not a dynamic person. She had nothing to say about her music. She didn't really want to offer any kind of advice or feedback to the students. She was just very, um, she was just very like bland and like, oh no, okay, and then where we were kind of used to.
How
I
can you
was used
say
to
that? I
nothing.
thought she was your favorite composer. You
Oh
always
yeah.
say that.
Yeah.
Only
Good.
only second to Gusty.
Oh my God. Okay. um. So John, do you want? Yeah. So we have this development from being in Puerto Rico, like
Hmm.
not being really exposed to that many new music until joining the Alia 21 ensemble,
Yeah.
then meeting and studying with Manuel Seide and studying with Carlos Cabrera,
Hmm.
and then you went to Italy, and then that kind of opened you up, and
Yeah.
you were defining yourself as a composer, and you
Yeah.
admit that you are more of a horizontal type of thinker, let's
Definitely. Yeah.
say. And after that, well, you are kind of like a very eclectic cosmopolitan composer. Like you are like grabbing this influence from here and from here and from here, which is, I think, it's very curious. And then you arrive in the UK and start um, absorbing more influences from there. So I would be interested in listening to
Yeah.
something from that period.
I think I sent you in the files I sent you recently the Tiento 5.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I think you have both the score and the audio. That is a shorter. I sent you one movement of that piece, so you can, and it's quite short. It's maybe 5 minutes long or something, so you can put it
yes,
fully.
yes,
And
yes.
that piece was probably me trying to find ways of emulating Donatoni's panel forms, or these blocks of music, where an idea develops and then goes into another idea in a very short format. And then, but also trying to go out of my way and not be completely Donatonian by employing things like the repetition of certain panels and certain gestures. Because one thing that is very curious about Donatoni is that things don't really repeat. You go from one to the other to the other to the other. And it's this idea of perpetual transformation and variation. So for me, it was, what if things do come back? That is one of my initial ways of changing these panel transformations, but still maintaining that quality of each individual block. So it's a piece filled with tiny blocks that then at the end all come together into a gigantic, well, not gigantic, but a very a longer fragment than the others.
Yeah, so then let's listen to it. I have the
Yeah.
score here, and let me put it up here. Whoop. Um, Wait a second. Here you go. Nope, nope. That. Move. There you go.
Yeah.
Have it.
Yep.
That's pretty cool. It seems very, very different from your
Yeah.
Hmm.
Juan Amores. I will have to point out. Well, in the absence of shunting, I will ask for in on his stead that he will ask how you think about rhythm, because
Mm.
rhythm seems very, very important in this piece.
Yeah,
Uh,
and in
Contrast
general,
Amor, well, everything that I will say from onwards will you will have to add in contrast to Amores, because
yes, of
we have
course, yeah.
contrasting piece
No,
in general.
I think that obviously if you see the score for Amores, you will see that it's all in very much an open notation. There's no bar lines. Everything is senza misura. Everything's more based on conductors' cues, events, and larger sections, which I still do in the sense that everything is still very blocky and that one thing comes after the other. But um, the my use of rhythm, if I would have to, to sum it up in a way, um, it, it's really about, um, well, let me see. When I start composing any piece, the first thing I do is I draw bar lines. Okay, in a blank piece of paper, I draw
That's
bar lines.
Remegan, do you remember who did this? No? Morton Feldman. He drew first.
Oh,
Yes,
you're
he
right. I forgot about that. Yes.
was like a canvas. He drew first the bar line,
Yeah.
the spaces, and then he will write the music.
Yeah. Because he
Very
was like
interesting.
thinking about the spaces first. Yeah. Before the music.
Sorry to interrupt, but
No, 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 no
I
worries, no
have to
worries.
mention that. Cool,
Yeah,
pretty cool.
Yeah.
the first thing I do before I even put a single note is I draw bar lines on a blank piece of paper. And so I take my manuscript paper, I draw a few bar lines, and then I start randomly, really randomly, putting different meters. So some 4 4 7 8, 4 4 5 8, 4 4 7 8, stuff like that. And then I will try within the melodic material that I have worked out previously, find a way of working it within these these bar lines or these well, you could say limitations that I have put myself, because I really enjoy working with constraints, like saying, okay, I need to feel something out within these bars. And maybe out of those 6 or 8 bars that I write, maybe I would like two. And then I take those two and then try to work out the same thing and continue finding ways of transforming them. And what I do is I really look at not only the um, the value of the notes and the duration, but also I look at its negative space and what is left out. So a lot of what I do in other bars and other meters is filling in whatever is not in those initial bars, and then start making contrast and playing around with like a little puzzle of taking out, putting in, and that's kind of the initial process of how it works out with rhythm. And a lot of my rhythms naturally come out in sequences of 3 and 2 because of the Puerto Rican clave, the clave in folkloric music in Latin America and in many other cultures. But it's kind of embedded in my being, so a lot of things naturally come out within those meters. That's why I use a lot of odd meters in 5 and 7 because of the relationships between 3s and 2s. And so in this piece, for example, it has a lot to do with not only using those 3 and 2 sequences literally, but also in negative space. So leaving out the 3s and 2s so that they can become this negative or silent clave as well.
So negative spaces
Yeah,
in the score.
yeah, negative spaces in the scores.
Huh. That's something to think about. Well, Shantin says that your music is very vibrant. That's how he describes it. And I would say that this one in particular kind of like articulates that, emanates that type of energy and stuff. Megan, do you have to say something about this before I kind of like
No,
chime?
I mean, I think it's very interesting the process. It's very playful and fun, and I like to put constraints on myself too. But oftentimes, the constraints I put on myself are more to do with technique than rhythm per se. Though I do have pieces where like note duration has a lot of limitations, but I find myself when I uh, put myself in a tiny little box where it seems like I've really limited my possibilities. That's when I'm going to be the most creative, and I'm going to like knock on the edges of those boxes and think of different things. Uh, Otherwise, I think I can tend to be redundant. Like there are certain things I like in music a lot. There's certain qualities, and if I don't do stuff like that, I will make the same choices all the time because I do have strong preferences of sounds and characters I love, but going only with that is very boring.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that for me, I I try to find ways of channeling whatever mindset I'm in within each piece. I remember once a student asking me uh, why a piece came a certain way, why another piece came out a certain way, and really it was the mindset. I remember this teacher of mine, Andres van Rossum, always talking about these exercises in honesty, which were very uh, very interesting that you would sit down on the piano and you would play a sequence of notes, but you had to love each note. You had to love each sequence of notes that came out, and at some certain points in your life, it came out in a very modal or tonal fashion, and then other points in your life, it came out in a very dissonant manner. And it's whatever you're really more interested or inclined to in those moments. And I love that diversity of playing out with different um, different techniques, different idioms, different ways of channeling whatever interests you more in that particular moment. Right now, for example, I'm really interested in modality again for some reason, and uh, searching for ways of uh, masking modality and channeling modality in my pieces. Um,
Huh.
so it's really whatever is in your journey, in your compositional journey, whatever is interesting you again. Um, but I
Yeah.
think that piece 105 was really a way of channeling those ideas of Donatoni, and also finding ways of working with that horizontal way of composing, but also playing around with the orchestration and the textures of things that I really still enjoy. Like you find different still moments in that piece, and I still am very interested in stillness in certain moments of my
Mhm.
works. Um, so I value each of those pieces for whatever it brought me during the moment.
Mhm.
So
So then what was the transition for you, like going from the UK back to Puerto Rico? Uh, yeah, especially as a composer.
Well, I think that I didn't leave the UK in in thinking that that was the end of all the opportunities as a composer. I think I left the UK with a lot of beautiful experiences, and a really larger mindset of how we could work with these things, and it really made me made me think about how collaboration is still a very important thing in our work, and how we need to join forces and in order to bring out whatever it is we want to do. That is why I still perform my colleagues' works, and they perform mine, and they the that relationship that you build with your peers and your colleagues is as important as anything else. That is, for example, why with Juan, who I've worked with before and recorded his music, and I'm very happy to perform his works.
I'm very
It's
grateful.
Yeah, and I think that is what we need to build as composers, that relationship between uh, composers and performers, in order to just create a space for us, because obviously the performance opportunities are always limited, but you never know what will come out of these relationships that we build with others. So after leaving the UK, where maybe I don't have as many um, workshop opportunities or performance opportunities within the the world of academia, which is
Mhm.
very much a moment in the lives of composers, when you're protected by the university, in a sense that everything you do can and will be performed within that space. Then when you're out of there, you're on your own, and you still need to find ways of having things to do. And I think what I
Mhm.
left with was a really great uh, set of tools to help me continue composing, and be very happy doing it.
Yeah, I think that
Okay, cool.
we all people could say the same about like the experience of academia and going out of academia. That
Oh
academia
yeah.
is like a mother, and we are still like kids when we are within its space. And like after
Yeah.
academia, it's like we go out into the world, we grow up, we go into adulthood, in the sense that we are not held by the hand anymore. Definitely speaking,
Yeah.
I will have to
And
say
quite
that,
a lot of them,
yeah.
and quite a lot of like a lot of them don't aren't able to continue composing after academia, and that they don't. I don't know what if they just don't have the drive. I mean, it is definitely challenging, but they just don't have the drive or the willpower. Like Juan and I definitely had colleagues, some of them who wrote quite good music that just haven't written in the decade since.
Yeah, and it's kind of sad because you see the so much wasted potential, but at the same time, it's like it is what it is. Um, it's for I think that for everyone is unless you end up with a position in academia, which there are less and less every day. It's like it's very
Mhm.
hard to have your works presented in a consistent manner. Um, in fact, you you've had a couple of performances after graduating, right, John? But I wanted to
Oh,
go back to that tiento piece, five piece before we go on because I really I relate to that focus on rhythm in a way, but I kind of like I tend to focus on the dynamism.